Okay, that's enough checking the stock market. It's not looking so good today. But let me get your comments up here, and then we'll put on a show. The show that you deserve. Come on, comments. Let's go. Doesn't seem to be working. There it is. Slow but functional. Good. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tank or chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. To fill it with your favorite liquid, I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it's going to happen right now. Go. So good. Well, do you want to talk about mostly good news today? How about a day of mostly good news? All right. Number one, good news. The astronauts should be back sometime later this afternoon. Wilmore and Williams, and they're aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule. And if everything goes well, Elon Musk will have one of the greatest saves of all time. Sort of legendary. There was only one person in the world who could have saved those astronauts, his company, that is. And it's sure looking good. So I don't want to get ahead of it, but everything looks good right now. So we might see that around 6 p.m.-ish Eastern time. In other news, did you know that gas is cheaper than a year ago and egg prices are collapsing? And those are the two things that people talked about the most when they talked about inflation. And both of them quite down. Have you heard the Democrats complaining about egg prices lately? Nope. Have the Democrats been complaining about gas prices lately? Nope. Now, I don't know what Trump did or did not do that would have affected either of these things. Maybe it's just the market adjusting, and maybe it was just going to happen on its own. But the way it works is the incumbent always gets credit and always gets blame. So if we play by those rules, Trump gets the credit. But one thing that didn't happen is we're not seeing the tariffs or anything else increasing the cost of those basics. So has anybody seen any costs go up because of tariffs? I have not. So we'll see. In other good news, do you remember there were a couple of IRS whistleblowers who wanted to investigate Hunter Biden, but they were told they couldn't do it and they were ostracized? Well, the two ostracized IRS whistleblowers just got promoted in the Treasury Department. So being a whistleblower is tough work and it's risky, and they definitely paid for it. But according to the New York Post, both of them now promoted. All right, I like that. More good news. Even more good news. Ben Shapiro is going to host a 5-part series called The Case for Derek Chauvin. So the Daily Wire will have that content. So Derek Chauvin, as you know, the one who was in jail for allegedly killing George Floyd. So Ben Shapiro has decided to sort of take on this, what I would call a great injustice, because I think it was just a racial outcome. We'll see if that makes a difference. Now, Ben Shapiro explains that there are some federal charges, but there are also the state charges. So, Trump couldn't pardon any state charges. So I don't think there's any chance Derek Chauvin will get out of jail. But I like the fact that Ben is being so gutsy and he's gutsy in the service of the right thing, meaning that if you're gonna put yourself out there and you're gonna take a risk, it should be for something important. And to me, this is pretty important because the Derek Chauvin thing was just, in my opinion, pure racism. And so if he can get that fixed, that would be great. You want an update on Fani Willis? You know, the DA who was going after Trump? Well, there was a part of that process where she was asked to produce some records, and she decided not to, and now she's being fined by the court $54,000 to pay for, I guess, lawyer fees and other stuff. So Fani Willis did not put Trump in jail, but it just cost her $54,000. So that's good news. So allegedly, sometime today, Trump will be releasing all, in quotes, all the JFK files. Do you believe that? So 80,000 pages, and he wants it to be all unredacted. How many of you believe that the JFK files will be released, they'll be unredacted, and they'll be complete, and there'll be something in there that we didn't know that matters? Not a chance. Not a chance. If anything was in there that mattered, that would have been taken out of there so long ago. I mean, there's no part of me that thinks there's any possibility that we're going to read these documents and it's going to say something like, "Oh wow, the CIA worked with the mafia," or it was actually the Federal Reserve decided to kill Kennedy, or it was some foreign country. No, that's not going to be there. Probably whatever the Warren report reported, it'll be just something to back that up. So don't expect much. Well, Harvard has announced that they're going to be tuition free for students who come from families with annual incomes of $200,000 or less, starting in the coming year. So imagine going to Harvard for free because your family made $200,000 or less. Now, probably that sounds to you like, wow, how are they going to make money? But I'm not sure about this, but I'll bet there aren't that many people who apply to Harvard who do not have parents who are making, between the two of them, 200,000 or more. I'll bet there are not a lot of people in that category because, by the time you had enough, let's say, scholastic support to be qualified to go to Harvard, it says something about your socioeconomic situation. So there's not going to be a lot of people applying who totally are qualified, and yet their parents make less than 200,000. But here's my question: are white males included in this? It kind of doesn't say, does it? So the DEI was a big thing, but now the universities are trying to pretend they're not doing DEI. So is this just a backdoor DEI play? Do you think that they're going to accept basically white guys who qualify totally, and they're going to give them free educations if their family income is under 200,000? I'm going to say I'd believe that when I see it, but I'm not prepared to believe it just by assumption. To me, I would expect that Harvard would continue to be racist, and that it would show itself in this policy as well. There's no reporting on that. There's no indication they'll be racist. But given that they have a long racist past, what would you expect? All right, here's some fake news. The Associated Press had to withdraw their own story. They had a story that said that Tulsi Gabbard had said that Trump and Putin are very good friends. Do you remember seeing that story? I saw it when it was new, and I swear to God, as soon as I read it, I said, fake news, and didn't even think about it again because it seemed so obviously fake news. Well, it turns out that Tulsi was talking about Indian Prime Minister Modi, and so it was fake news, and now the AP is withdrawing their story. That's kind of a big one to get wrong. You know, the difference between Trump is best friends with the Prime Minister Modi, you know, one of our more important allies, versus he's best friends with Putin. That's a really big difference. Really big. Meanwhile, the swattings continue. So you probably know if you're on X, you probably know Juanita Broderick. So she got swatted. So about 10 police and SWAT teams showed up at her house. Man, that is not funny. Let me tell you. So far, nobody's been hurt. So I'm going to give police some credit for that. But I think it was yesterday or the night before, there was a gentleman who I don't know, but somebody who must have been in the podcasting business, who got swatted. And when he tells his story, oh my God, is it chilling. So imagine, if you will, that you hear a noise or your video camera picks up something and you know there's somebody sort of outside your door. And apparently he could see the silhouette of a male carrying a rifle who was basically trying his doorknob. And he was armed. And he had a dog that looked like maybe the dog could take care of business too. So this was a conservative guy who took him about 10 seconds to find his own weapon. And he had somebody with a silhouette of a rifle trying to enter his home without any announcement. You know, no bullhorns, no nothing. Now, the good news is that, you know, he asked who they were before he opened fire, and they identified themselves as police, and that everything was fine. So there were no problems. But you can't get any closer to dead than that. That's as close as you can get to dead. So this swatting stuff, I sure hope there's a way to find out who's doing it so we can get some of them in jail. It's really disturbing. Anyway, in a bunch of lawmakers in where is it? Wisconsin? I think it's Wisconsin. Are trying to make it part of the medical, I guess, medical definition that Trump derangement syndrome would be defined as a mental illness. And the symptoms would include Trump-induced general hysteria, inability to distinguish between legitimate policy differences, and signs of psychic pathology. Now, I don't think there's any chance that that will become law, but it's hilarious. It's hilarious that it's being presented. And by the way, I think it is a mental illness. So it's not hilarious because it's just a prank. It's hilarious because it's true. That if we took any of this seriously, we would have Trump derangement syndrome listed as an actual mental illness. Because if you've been paying attention, it's definitely a mental illness. I mean, if you know anybody who has it, you know what I'm talking about. It's not normal. It doesn't help their life. It makes them deeply unhappy. And nothing that they see makes sense. So they're hallucinating and full of anxiety and depression. And I mean, that's the very definition of a mental illness. So that's not going anywhere, but it's funny. Meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg on The View, she said that if Trump can deport terrorists, he can deport any one of us. Let me check the logic. If he can deport a terrorist, then he can deport anybody. Let's see if we can take that logic up a level. So if you can put a murderer in jail for murder, you could put anybody in jail for anything. If you can send a missile at the Houthis, well, what's to stop you from sending a missile at The View? If you can, I think you see where this is going. Well, what kind of dumbass analysis is it to say that if you can deport a terrorist or somebody that you think is, leading in that direction or supporting the terrorists, that you can deport any one of us? I don't know. Sounds a little like Trump derangement syndrome, perhaps. Anyway, Virginia Kruta at the Daily Wire is reporting on that. I don't know if you saw it, but on CNN, the Harry Enton, their polling and data guy, was just having a wild time talking about how poorly Democrats are polling at the moment. So the Democrat Party, and I guess it's the record low approval for, I don't know how many years it's been. And multiple polls are showing the same thing, just wildly low opinions of the Democrat Party, even within the Democrats. And then here's the funny part. 65% of Democrats say that they should stay principled, even if nothing gets done. So they'd rather stick to their principle, no matter how bad that is for the world, because they want to stick to their principle. Now, that's mental illness, isn't it? That doesn't feel like, oh, you're such a guru. You're like the Buddha. You're sticking to your principle. Well, not if it just makes everything worse. Sometimes you got to negotiate with the people that you don't like. Anyway, so if you haven't seen yet Jon Stewart of The Daily Show mocking Chuck Schumer, oh my God, does he go at him brutally. He's done it before, but he takes it to a whole new level. He's just absolutely savaging Chuck Schumer. Have you noticed that the only way Democrats can get attention in the current environment is to attack other Democrats? Have you noticed that? Because when they attack Trump, it's just background noise, because they all attack Trump and they say the same things. Literally, they say the same things because they have the same script and everything. So attacking Trump doesn't get them any attention at all. But attacking their own team, well, I'm talking about it now. So, so the thing that's happening with the Democrats is the more they hate Trump, which seems to increase every day, the more they hate Trump, the more they hate the Democrat Party for not fighting Trump. So that's called a death spiral or circling the drain. If the more you hate your opponent makes you hate your own team even more for not doing enough to hate the opponent and do something about it, that looks unrecoverable. It just looks like everything's just going to keep getting worse for the Democrats. Death spiral. And I don't know why it's so funny, but the Democrats' complete lack of awareness and complete lack of talent at this point, it just is funny. So Don Lemon was on Bill Maher's Club Random, and Don Lemon said that he's talking about who the leaders of the Democrat Party are or should be. He says, people love AOC, Jasmine Crockett, and Eric Swalwell. Democrats should prioritize putting them out there more. Yeah, that's right, Don. You're totally right. We'd like to see more AOC, Jasmine Crockett, and Eric Swalwell, please. I would like that, because that's a lot like giving up. In fact, it's exactly like giving up, because the more we see these three characters, the lower the approval will be for Democrats. And how could Don Lemon not be aware of that? Do you think he really doesn't know what people think of those three characters? I don't know. I guess AOC is now polling at the top to be she's the closest thing to the Democrat views, according to some polls. So good luck with that, Democrats. Good luck. All right, so I told you I was going to be optimistic today. So we know that Trump is absolutely demolishing the Democrats in the polling. So the Democrat Party looks like the worst it's been forever. And Trump remains at what looks like a high point for Trump. So he's at a high point of popularity for himself, while they're at a low point. But could it get worse for Democrats? Well, let's walk through a couple of what ifs. What if the whole tariff situation works out perfectly? Now, I'm not predicting it, but it's possible. What if, as Kevin O'Leary points out, he was on Gutfeld, he says every single tariff scheduled on every product in every country has never been looked at this way. You know, he's talking about the reciprocal tariffs and all the other tariffs. He goes, what happens? Both sides look at each other and say, how about no tariffs? Because tariffing each other just will lead to ruin, because we'll increase ours, they'll increase theirs. And then apparently Scott Bessent has already said that going into April 2nd, now some of our most imbalanced trading partners come forward and want to drop their tariffs. So what Kevin O'Leary is saying is that, you know, the tariff threat is going to cause countries to simply negotiate what should have been the tariff situation in the first place, which is no tariffs. So what if that's what happens? And what if it happens before summer? And what if all the noise that Democrats made about tariffs ruining the world turned into nothing but other countries removing their tariffs, and we do too? That would be one of the greatest economic plays of all time. And I'm not going to predict it's going to happen, because, you know, there's lots of complexity there. But there's a really good chance that something sort of directionally like that will happen, that you'll never see any serious inflation because the risk of tariffs did all the work. We didn't need the tariffs. We just needed the threat of tariffs. And that would be a perfect Trump outcome. Now, remember I always say that Trump doesn't bluff? He will definitely tariff your ass. So if you decide that you want to fight it out, well, good luck. He's just going to tariff you into oblivion. And he really will, and it's not a bluff. So all the smart people are going to say, you know, what would be better is but if we just try to compete, something like that. All right. So what if tariffs work out? Here's another one. What if everything about Doge works out? What if Doge actually solves our biggest existential threat, which is runaway spending? It could. I mean, they're seemingly doing the right stuff to make that happen, and seemingly making lots of progress. Now, there's lots more to go. They're nowhere near getting rid of $1 trillion or $2 trillion, but boy, do they have a grip on things. So I feel like, you know, Elon Musk and his Doge team are like pit bulls. And so the real question is, did they close their jaws on this thing? And I think the answer is yes. So you can't predict exactly where the Doge thing will end up, but I think they're in full pit bull. We've got your ass in our grip right now, and we're not letting go ever. So what if Doge works out? Do you know what the history books will not say about Doge if it all works out? Here's what the history books will not say. You know, I thought they used a little too much chainsaw and not enough scalpel. Just think about it. All that matters with Doge is, does it work? We're not going to care in the long run whether there were some imperfections. We're not going to really care if the Democrats said, oh, it's too chainsaw-y, not enough not enough scalpel. Nobody's going to care about any of that. They're going to care, did you save the country from an existential debt problem? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, Doge will go down in history as one of the greatest things that ever happened, and one of the most difficult, most challenging, and most, I could argue, even most patriotic. Because what Musk is doing is the ultimate patriotic act. He's putting his physical body at risk. This is dangerous stuff. He's putting his other businesses at tremendous risk. And he's doing it because the alternative is we all die. That's the ultimate patriotic act. You can't be more patriotic than that. The full self-sacrifice for a life and death situation that would affect billions, because it would be more than the U.S. if we go down. So tariffs might work out, and Doge might work out, and both of them seem to be trending positive. What if they do? So then you would have Trump not causing inflation and inflation coming down. You would have trade deals improved. You would have Doge not just cutting costs, but maybe regulations as well. So just imagine that world. Our energy businesses are fully unfettered. We stop being completely crippled by weird climate change assumptions. We fix our international tariff situation, and we reduce our debt. That's all completely doable. You can't yet predict that it's all going to go right, but it's all heading in the right direction, and the right people are working on it and doing the right things about it. I've got a prediction that by the third year of the Trump presidency, everything's going to kick in, because a lot of this stuff is kind of slow. It takes a while to work its way through the system. Elon Musk was on, I think it was a Ted Cruz podcast, and he said that they've discovered a bunch of magic money computers at the Treasury. Magic money computers. And I'll do the best to explain what that is. So this is Elon Musk's explanation. He said, you would think the government computers all talk to each other and are synchronized. And the numbers you see are real numbers. They're not magic money computers. But apparently the magic money computers are computers that just make money out of thin air. They just issue payments. So they don't check to see if money exists. They just issue the payments. So if they issue the payments, it's like the money existed. They're mostly at the Treasury. Some are at Health and Human Services, and some at State and DOD. But they found 14 magic money computers that just send out money out of nothing. So how important is it that he found the magic money computers? Oh my God, the things that Doge has already discovered, dismantling the whole NGO. I hope that's what happens, but at least we understand what the NGO situation was. The USAID situation, all what looks like a massive money laundering scheme and a power scheme for Democrats. What if we unwind all of that? Because it looks like we might. I don't know. All of it might be too much. Meanwhile, there's a discovery at the University of Texas at Austin. Mario Naufel is reporting on this. We've discovered over $8 billion of rare earth in the U.S. that could end our dependence on China. But are you having the same feeling I am, which is $8 billion of rare earth feels like not nearly enough rare earth? But apparently what they found is that they can get into our coal ash landfills. So I didn't know we had coal ash landfills, but apparently those landfills aren't doing anything else useful. But if we dig through them, you can recover a whole bunch of rare earth materials from the coal ash landfills. I guess we got a bunch of them in the US. And the study was backed by the US Department of Energy. So 8.4 billion doesn't seem like enough, does it? It seems like the headline and the numbers don't match. That somehow this is going to make us, nearly independent from Chinese rare earth materials, but only 8 billion? I don't know, just feels low. Meanwhile, MSNBC host Simone Sanders Townsend, she decided that the Democrats are so lame, her party, that she's been advising for and, essential component of the party. She's decided she's leaving the Democratic Party to become an independent. How embarrassing do the Democrats have to become before Simone Sanders Townsend says publicly, I'm out? Because her world is Democrats. Like, the primary thing she does is take jobs supporting Democrats. Didn't she work on Sanders' campaign and then Biden's campaign? Imagine somebody at that level of access and influence just saying, I'm out. Democrats you've just lost it. So again, how do Democrats get attention? Mostly by attacking other Democrats. Here's another example. Well, let's talk about Iran and the Houthis. There was a story that's been debunked that somehow an Iranian intelligence ship was sunk by U.S. forces, but apparently that didn't happen. That is fake news, I believe. But as you know, we're bombing the Houthis because they're attacking ships in the Red Sea, and Trump has made some pretty direct threats to Iran because Iran backs the Houthis. So he's sort of saying that we're holding Iran responsible for everything the Houthis do. So that kind of suggests there might be some military plans against Iran. But that's not the most popular thing in the world. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants you to know that she opposes war in the Middle East. So she's not down with attacking Iran. I don't know if that means she's not down with the attacks on the Houthis, because it has a very narrow ambition, which is to make shipping cheaper. And Thomas Massey agrees with Marjorie Taylor Greene. How many of you, just in the comments, how many of you think our best play is to just completely withdraw any kind of action or support or military action in the Middle East? How many think that's our best play? Because I don't know. I was trying to think, what would happen if we just said, okay, I guess there's nothing we can do about the Red Sea being unavailable to us, so we'll just let our other competitors, our international competitors for trade, we'll just let them have really low costs because they don't get attacked, but we won't be able to use the low-cost shipping network. We'll use the expensive one, and we'll just always do that because the alternative would be war. Well, the way that the U.S. has projected power in the past, and Mike Benz is great at explaining all this, is that our military was always sort of joined at the hip with our big corporations, meaning that it was far more likely that our military would get involved somewhere where, if things went well, our big corporations would have more access to to resources and more access to markets. So it's not unusual for us to do warlike things just to make our economics work better. It's a long history. We do that. So my trouble with the attacking the Houthis is, how could that possibly work? How could we possibly punish the Houthis to the point where there's not another Houthi willing to launch another missile? Because we're not going to kill every single Houthi. And if you have one left, the Iranians are going to say, hey, you one Houthi who's left, you want to shoot a rocket? We'll put it there and we'll teach you how to use it. You just push this button. I don't think the Houthis can be stopped because we're not really used to enemies that don't care about dying and have some larger purpose that's beyond survival. We don't really know how to deal with that, and the Middle East is full of that. So what do you do? I don't know. But meanwhile, the least surprising thing in the Middle East is that the Gaza ceasefire didn't hold. Do you think there's anybody here who couldn't predict that the Gaza ceasefire wouldn't hold? Did you think that the Hamas was going to give back all the hostages? Did anybody think they were going to do that? No. So it was pretty much guaranteed that even if we got a few hostages back, the ceasefire wasn't going to hold because either they would not give us back the hostages or something. Now there's also some reporting that says that Israel thinks there was going to be another October 7th like attack. Well, I don't know about that, but maybe they were planning that. And so I guess 400 or more than 400 people were killed, according to one unreliable report. But it's getting pretty brutal. And would you like to hear the alternative to basically killing every person in Gaza? So what would be the alternative? Well, Egypt has a proposal for what to do with Gaza, and it's backed by Saudi Arabia. So let me see if you think this is a practical proposal. So they would bring in thousands of mobile homes to put the Gaza displaced people in, and they would be safely in their little homes while Gaza is cleaned up and and services are restored. So that would take a long time, but they would happily be in their mobile homes, off-site. So they wouldn't be in Gaza, but they'd be nearby, and they would encourage Hamas to talk with the Palestinian Authority, the people in charge of the other Palestinians who are not in Gaza. And between them, they would set up some kind of a government or a governing structure that would be more of a technocrat cabinet, meaning it wouldn't be, hardline anything. It would just be people who know how to keep the lights on. So they would be technocrats. What do you think of that? And then they would eventually negotiate the creation of a Palestinian state. There's really no chance any of that's going to happen because Israel seems to be quite dead set on the fact that no Hamas is ever going to go back into Gaza or have any extra power in any other area around them. So there's really no chance that Israel would ever allow this to happen because if even 3 Hamas leaders are all that's left and every other person is killed, they're still not going to let the 3 into any kind of a government power position. And I think the Hamas wants to maintain its military. Do you see any possibility that Israel will say, well, okay, it looks like you've learned your lesson, so you can keep what's left of your military? Not a chance. The Hamas leaders and the Hamas military are going to be ground down to nothing, or else Israel is not going to feel like they're done. And again, if you're new to me, I'm not backing Israel. I'm just observing. So I don't support Israel or back it because it's not my country. And even though they're allies, that doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they do. Sometimes you can just observe it and say, all right, if we were in that situation, what would we be doing? And since I don't see much difference between what they're doing and what we would do in the same situation, I'm not condemning it because countries do what's in their best interest. And Israel is definitely doing what they perceive to be in their best interest. So when countries are doing what's in their best interest, that's not a moral, ethical, who do you like situation. It's just, oh, of course, they're doing what's in their best interest. They have the power. So they're getting over on the other side. If Hamas had all the power, don't you think they would be destroying Israel and doing a lot of bad things out of what they would think is revenge? Of course they would. And I wouldn't be in favor of that either. So it's not whether I'm in favor of anything. So this is important. I'm not in favor of anything, and I'm not against anything. I'm just observing. And if Israel is doing what Israel thinks is in their best national interest, what would you expect them to do? Like, should they act not in their best interest? So I don't have anything to say about that. It's just an observation. We're just watching, basically. The only question we have is what involvement we want. So I think Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie would probably say, how about a little less involvement over there, or maybe a lot less. And it's good that we have those voices, even if you don't agree with them. You know, it would be scary if everybody in the United States Congress said, oh, yeah, maximum attack. Don't want that. All right, in other news, Trump has revoked the Secret Service detail for both Hunter Biden and Ashley Biden. Hunter Biden, as we found out from Laura Loomer, who's got the exclusive on this, she found out that Hunter Biden was living, at least for now, in South Africa, and he had up to 18 Secret Service people on his detail who had to also be in South Africa because that's where he is. Do you know how expensive it would be to keep 18 Secret Service people employed and fed and housed at a seaside resort? Now, I don't know where their rooms are, but that's where Hunter is. Anyway, so Hunter got loomered, as we like to say. Laura Loomer basically took away his Secret Service detail. Now, Trump is the one who did it, but nobody knew where it was until Laura Loomer got that scoop. So you probably heard that Trump has declared void the preemptive pardons that Joe Biden did before he left office. And the thinking is that they were signed by the auto pen and that Biden was not mentally capable to know what he was doing, and therefore they're not valid. Now, I don't think there's any chance. Well, what Trump says, he says it's not my decision. It'll be up to the court. But I would say that they're null and void, meaning the pardons. Now, I like the way he's caging it because Trump has been consistent in obeying the court. The one time he didn't was with the Trenda Iragua Venezuelans he was sending back in the planes. But his argument is that they were already in international waters, so the judge's ruling didn't apply. So that's the closest he's been to, let's say, refusing the court's orders. But he has an argument, which again could be resolved by a higher court. So as long as Trump stays in the world which says, if the court tells me I have to do something, I'll do it. It's a lot less dictatorial, right? If he was saying, I don't care what the court says, I'm going to void these pardons, I would say, okay, that's too far. I'm not cool with that. But if he says, I have this opinion, but it would have to be validated by the courts, or at least not stopped by the courts, then I say, okay, that's a bold and provocative thing you're looking at there, but you're not breaking any laws because you get to interpret things as the chief executive, and the courts get to tell you if that was right or wrong or if it's going to fly. So as long as he's within the bounds of our system, I'm a little more supportive. Now, I don't think that he thinks he could win this in the courts, because I don't see how the court would ever prove that Joe Biden didn't know what he was doing. That would be hard to prove. You'd be sort of proving a negative. It'd be one thing to prove he did know what he was doing, but how do you prove he didn't know? I don't know. Now, do you remember the story that Mike Johnson told where he met with Biden when Biden was president, and he asked him, "Why did you sign this thing that I think it had to do with natural gas? Why did you sign this thing that's bad for Louisiana?" And Biden said, "I didn't do that." And Mike Johnson said, "You definitely did that. You just did that." And then Biden called in his assistants and said, "Did I do that?" And then with a little bit of digging, found out, yes, he had signed something that he was not aware of. Now, that's Mike Johnson's telling of it. Have you heard the Democrat telling of that same story? I did not until I brought it up with my smart Democrat friend. So I've got a smart Democrat friend. I said, well, that thing about the auto pen, it's not insane because that Mike Johnson story suggests that Biden didn't know what he was signing, which means maybe the auto pen signed that thing that he didn't know about. But here's the Democrat version of that story. The part that Mike Johnson was complaining about was a small part of a larger, more complicated bill. And so if you missed that this larger, more complicated bill that people are not complaining about in general had this one negative thing for Louisiana, that would have been easy to miss. And as soon as Biden was informed, there was this unintended consequence, with this detail that you maybe were not aware of, then Biden reversed at least the Louisiana part of it. Now, does that sound true to you? It's a pretty good defense, but here's my question. Do you think that Bill Clinton would have made that mistake? Or would he asked enough questions and understood it well enough to know what he was signing and to know it would influence maybe Louisiana in a bad way? I don't know. What about Obama? Do you think Obama would have not noticed he was signing something that had a downside that wasn't obvious? I don't know. So without really digging into what that bill was and forming my own opinion, I'm going to say it's a pretty good defense from the Democrat side. If that's your argument, pretty good. I don't know what's true. I don't know if a reasonable person would have easily caught it. I don't know. But at least they have a defense. Stephen Miller was on TV, on the news, talking about the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. That's the one that Trump used to deport the Venezuelan gangs. And apparently the trick here is that it has to be something coming from a nation, not just a gang. But there's some kind of documentation that shows that Venezuela intentionally was sending the bad people to the U.S. Now, if Venezuela, which would feel itself sort of an enemy to the United States based on current interactions, if they're an enemy to the United States and they did something that's bad for the United States by sending in armed killers, then is that close enough to being an alien enemy? Is that a stretch? Well, again, I suppose if the courts stopped it, then Trump would stop it. But they got clever and they made sure that the plane was in international waters before any rulings came down. But speaking of getting lured, turns out that the judge who tried to reverse the planes and say, no, you can't send these people away. I don't think the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 applies to this situation. So turn those planes around even if they're in the air. Would you be surprised to learn that the judge's daughter is heavily involved in leftist politics? Would you be surprised to learn that the judge's spouse is super involved, like really activist? Both his wife and his daughter are total anti-Trumpers. Now, do you think he should have recused himself? Because same judge was involved in, what was he involved in? He was involved in FOIA stuff. He was involved in Ray Epps stuff. And that judge that made that ruling apparently attended at least one of Trump's trials in person and stood in the back to watch what happened. Now, how many judges go to other trials to watch them? This guy was so, yeah. This guy was so deeply anti-Trump, and his wife and his daughter, that conflict of interest doesn't even come close. This is like the ultimate conflict of interest, just absurd, ridiculous conflict of interest. And so Laura Loomer had the goods on the daughter, and so that judge is getting loomered. We're making that Laura makes that a verb. I like it. Getting loomered. Anyway, so today is the day that Trump is going to have a phone call with Putin. I don't know about the time zones, so perhaps that's already happened. I feel like it would happen early in the day. So I don't know if it's happened, but I'm not seeing a great hope that a deal will be made right away. It doesn't seem to me that one phone call is going to work it out. Now, we have been getting indications from the Trump administration that they're close to some kind of a deal, but I don't think so. I feel like that might be just optimism, and that there's always going to be a new wrinkle. But I'll tell you something I saw on the podcast Trigonometry, which is one of the great podcasts out there. So the Trigonometry duo had Boris Johnson on. And I had never heard this view of the Ukraine-Russia situation. Now, Democrats say, some people say, it's obvious that Russia started the war because they militarily crossed the border with the military, with forces. So a lot of people say that's the start of the war, so they're to blame. But then other people say, well, wait a minute. They had warned long ago that if Ukraine was looking at being a NATO member, that was a red line and that would force military action. So really, you could blame the United States and Europe for creating a situation that guaranteed he would attack, because he said, under no situation are you going to put this other NATO country on my doorstep. But then Boris Johnson has a third interpretation, which is that long before the actual military actions, Putin had said in writing, and I guess he said it a number of times, that his ambition basically was to take over Ukraine, and that he had arguments about the history and why it all makes sense and why they're really part of Russia, and that the NATO membership, according to Boris Johnson, was never imminent, meaning that, maybe it might happen in 20 years, but there was nothing happening in Ukraine that would make the NATO countries say, yeah, why don't you join NATO? So his take is that Russia simply used the NATO thing as a pretext to do the thing he was going to do one way or another. And I say to myself, I can't rule that out. So have you ever heard that take? I've heard mostly takes about how we poked Russia, by threatening NATO, and that would mean missiles that are too close to them and all kinds of stuff, and that it's basically our fault. And I've been taking that view. I've been taking the view that if you poke the bear, you can't say the bear started the fight when the bear kills you. Even though the bear started the violence, it didn't really start the fight. It was you poking it with a stick. But if you imagine that the stick poking was all a fake premise and that there was never really any stick poking potential, it was just talk of a stick, then it does kind of support the idea that Putin just wanted to control as much as he could that made sense historically anyway. So I'll just put that out there. It's just weird that I'd never heard that take before. So I guess I blame myself for being underinformed about that. Um, so I'm going to bet against a speedy peace deal. I think there's going to be a lot more negotiating, and it might take weeks or months. We'll see. We might have at least one false deal. Like we might have at least one false positive where the news says, yes, a deal has been agreed to in principle. And then 24 hours later, this would be the most common thing. 24 hours later, Russia will say, we didn't agree to that, right? Or vice versa. Russia will say, well, you agreed to give us Crimea. And then we'd say, we didn't agree to that. So I feel like there's going to be at least one fake news report that says, yes, everything's worked out. Peace is coming. And then one side or the other will say, no, that didn't happen. That's totally made up. So apparently, not too long ago, Ukraine did a fully automated attack, which was only robots and drones, and it was successful. So they beat back some Russians in at least one place. So it makes me wonder if since Trump, what does it say? I'm seeing a message from Kash Patel. Oh, wow. So Kash Patel says he's arrested some big cartel member from Mexico. All right, good. One less cartel member. Good for that. So maybe the peacekeeping force in Ukraine will be robots. Would Russia like that any more than they would like your European boots on the ground? I don't know. So I don't see a deal happening right away. Apparently on the border, speaking of the border, the Mexican border, so Trump's putting in some more high-tech radar to spot their drones. That's good. You know, I told you the other day that fentanyl is way down, or at least the amount they've caught is way down. And I don't think that's because the border is more secure. There's something else going on. So I've got a feeling that maybe our special forces or our spooks or something are making a big difference in the lab production in Mexico. So I think they're disrupting the labs, and that's what's happening. I don't think it's the border itself that's making a difference, because almost all the fentanyl comes through legal checkpoints and just regular automobiles, because they don't check them all. So that's all it takes. Well, if they only check 2 out of 10, and it's cheap to make the fentanyl, so if you lose a shipment, it's no big deal. You just make more. Yeah, I don't see that the border enforcement made any difference, but we'll see. Meanwhile, HUD, and HUD, the housing group, and Secretary of the Interior plan to use federal lands for affordable housing. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner's added that, and the Department of Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum's outfit, they're going to work together to figure out if there's some federal land that could be used for low-income housing. Now, I don't want to be negative Nelly, but here's what I know about human beings. If I said to you, hey, how would you like to leave your terrible situation in this urban area and move to, you'll be in the middle of Idaho, but you'll be on federal land, it'll be awesome. Like you'll have your own place. How many people would say yes to that? Even if their current situation was dire and they were sleeping on the couch and, they didn't have any way to, build a life for themselves, and they may or may not be on drugs, and they may or may not be in a gang. How many of them are going to say, yeah, I think I'll move to Idaho and get on that federal land and get myself a nice little house and build myself a nice little life? I feel like nobody, because people live where they live because of the other people who live where they live. Would you give up all of your friends and the ability to easily see family members so you could get a cheap house on government land? I don't know anybody who would do that, even if their current situation was pretty bad. So, on one hand, I applaud the effort because we should just try everything. And maybe in the process we figure out what works and why it works, and maybe you have to move the whole family. Maybe people would agree as groups. They'd say, "Look, we'll move there if you move there, so we'll have our friends and our family there." Maybe. So, there's definitely a way it could work, but there are also 10 ways it won't work. And the other possibility is, people from low income, if they move into this nice area, how long will it stay nice? Will they have the resources to even maintain it? That sort of thing. Where will they work? I mean, the federal lands are not going to be close to jobs. So I have a lot of questions, but I'm also 100% in favor of let's try it. I like the Trump world entrepreneurial kind of vibe, which is we don't know if this will work, but who's got a better idea? If nobody has a better idea. So if the only thing that came out of it, for example, if the only thing that came out of that was we learned how to make really inexpensive homes, well, then we could take that knowledge and move it somewhere else. So I'm all in, but I don't think it'll be straightforward. It's going to be a tough one, tough climb. Well, the Chinese scientists, according to the South China Morning Post, have figured out how to turn the cancer tumors in your body into something that your body recognizes as pork. Let me say it again. Chinese scientists claim that they figured out how to turn your cancer tumors into something that the rest of your body will identify as pork, as in coming from a pig. And the reason is that when something, if you get a transplant from a pig heart, which is something that's happened, you would have to give that person all kinds of drugs for it not to be rejected. Because the human body just recognizes, wait a minute, that's not human. You got some pig stuff in me, so I'm going to reject that heart or that organ. So the cleverness here is that if you can make your body think that the tumor is pork, the body will reject the cancer. Now, almost every day I tell you there's some new cancer breakthrough that never turns out to be real. So I don't think this is any more likely than any other, but hey, maybe. All right. I promised you it would be mostly good news today, and I think it is. Economically, I think things are moving in the right direction. Biggest problem now is how do we stay out of a major war in the Middle East? I don't see any way we could win one. So on one hand, there's no way we're going to completely destroy Iran or make them join our side or be our ally. There's no way we're going to get rid of all of the Houthis. So what exactly are we going to do? Can anybody describe an end state where bombing the Houthis turns into a good situation where all the shipping is unchallenged after that? I can't even imagine it. So what would happen if we took the non-war path? We said, all right, if you guys are willing to do war and we're not, we're just going to have to get out of town. So we'll just pay 50% more for shipping for all American goods compared to what all the other countries do. I don't know. We have two completely unacceptable situations. So this is a tough one. If Trump can navigate this and get some kind of a good outcome for the Houthi situation, and I just can't even imagine it. I just think the Houthis have an unbeatable situation. And if you destroyed 99% of them, it would make no difference. Because the 1% would get new rockets tomorrow. And then they would recruit some more and just keep going. So there's that. but economically, I think things are heading in the right direction. That's good. The stock market, of course, is just worried about the churn and the uncertainty. But if you took away the uncertainty, which will seemingly take care of itself in several months, I think we're fine, but we'll see. All right. I'm going to say bye to X and YouTube and Rumble. I'm going to talk privately to the subscribers on Locals. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Local subscribers, I'm coming at you in 30 seconds. Uh-oh. Looks like that's not going to work. Let's try something else. All right, that button wasn't working. So how about if I do Rumble and Locals only? Yeah, that doesn't work. Locals supporters only. Okay. So I don't have the option of going private, apparently. So I'm going to have to catch you tomorrow, and we'll try to figure out how to close down the Rumble studio and make it all work. But thanks for joining, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. And today will be fun. JFK files, astronauts coming back, phone call with Putin. That's a lot of news today. Today's going to be awesome news day. All right. That's all for now. Thanks for joining. We'll see if I can even end this stream at all. Nope. So I can't figure out how to end the stream, so I'm going to need some help killing the feeds on YouTube and Rumble and X. I think the X one will just go away. So if you're watching on X, I think it'll just go away.